Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
I am Doug King.
On this week's episode, we put a bow on the Olympics, looking at the success stories, the disappointments, and why you never want a monkey on your shoulder.
Especially if he's not wearing diapers. We're also, with a joyous heart, going to welcome the fact that the NHL resumes this week, and NHL Revealed returns.
All that and more. Let's drop the puck on episode 31. We are back, episode 31 here, Doug.
31.
Luke Lipinski here, across the table from Doug Cannon. Doug, who's your...
My 31?
Yeah, your favorite all-time number 31.
Well, he's not my favorite, but
Okay,
I
who's the
think
best?
the best 31 would be Billy Smith.
That was such a kind of a backhanded compliment it turned into. He's not my favorite, but I guess he's good. What about Grant Fuhr?
Yeah, but Grant Fuhr didn't have 4 consecutive Stanley Cups.
It's true. And I'm not going to talk badly about Billy Smith because he will hit me with his
stick. Yes, Billy Smith. I'm never a big fan of Billy Smith just because of the way he played, but his stats and his wins and 4 consecutive Stanley Cups all kind of weigh all that stuff out.
No,
There's one more.
No, is it Curtis McElhaney?
What?
No. Okay.
It's a Curtis.
Anton Hudobin?
It's a Curtis.
Curtis Joseph.
Yes.
He was pretty good too.
Former Maple Leaf.
Former Coyote.
Former Coyote.
Former
leading
everything.
goaltender in the 1996 World Cup.
Yeah, you were so proud of yourself when you found that. The pre-show prep went in so many odd directions today. And you saw that stat and you're like, I'm using
that one.
And I was like, I don't know.
2.31 goals against.
In case you were wondering out there, you heard it here first. Curtis Joseph's goals against average in 1996. Not even the season, the World Cup that year. All right, we got to do the show. I'm not going to be very happy throughout most of this show. I've resigned myself to it.
Well, we're used to that, Luke.
No, I'm usually the positive light force on this show, and today I am anything but that. We got to start Olympics, and this is where my sadness begins.
Oh, no, not sadness.
First of all, I'm sad to see the Olympics go, just in general.
Why is that?
I am a huge Winter Olympics fan. I went snowboarding for a few days in the middle of this Olympic break, played hockey before and after, watched a lot of snowboarding, even watched skiing, and I don't ski. I mean, I watched the Jamaican bobsled team. They were fantastic. They were like an hour behind everybody else.
Yeah, I watched a lot of hockey.
Well, what else is new?
Yeah.
But so that's now done. Also, Team USA, the country I am from, did not finish very well.
They played well.
They started well.
Well, that's how you're going to position it.
Yeah. Because this is what they did last time, too. They came together as a team quicker than anybody. I was very impressed by that. I thought they played excellently in the preliminary rounds. Nice win over Russia that I think meant a lot more to a lot of other people. I think that win, I guess let's start there, since I've got about a billion thoughts here. The U.S. win over Russia. TJ Oshie, 6 shots in the shootout, makes 4 of them. Big win, but I think that win ultimately meant more to the typical American sports fan who doesn't necessarily follow hockey
because
year-round.
It was Russia?
Yeah. I mean, I heard people on prominent networks say, this isn't the Miracle on Ice, but it's the next best thing.
Well, while all that was going on, I was at a youth hockey tournament.
Okay.
There was a penalty shot in the game, a couple of games.
Okay.
What do you think the fans were chanting?
Oshie?
Yes. So,
look, it was big. I'm not trying to downplay
but,
it.
I mean, it was kind of fun, though.
No, it was great. And I loved the interviews with Oshie. He was like, look, I get that this is a big deal, but you guys are making a bigger deal out of it than it is. And it's just fun. If you're a hockey fan, you know who TJ Oshie is. He's one of the best players on one of the best teams.
Right.
But it was when he scored those goals, the next day everybody's like, here's an unknown player that stepped up for the... No, he's pretty good, actually. So that win was nice. That ended up being the highlight for Team USA. I would have much rather beat Canada, or I would have much rather have beaten Finland and just gotten a bronze.
It was funny going into the game against Team Canada. Our office is pretty divided between U.S. and Canadians, and so everybody was passing around the tail of the tape. How many wins? How many medals? Well, we're going to win because of this. We're going to win because of that. And I was sitting in the background, and I really thought that game was going to be more of a barn burner than a defensive game that it turned out to be. And I really said, as far as I was concerned, the table was leaning towards the U.S. It was a 50-50 call, but at the end of the day, I thought the U.S. had the edge just because of the way they were playing prior to that game.
So let's get into that game, and very quickly, your predictions before the tournament. were Canada gold, Sweden silver, U.S. bronze.
Right.
And I was Sweden, Canada gold, or Sweden gold, Canada silver, and U.S. bronze, just because I was willing to step out there on the ledge and be a man and make a bold
And
prediction.
I also said Russia. You laughed at me when I said Russia will be nowhere near the medals.
Look, did I have Russia on my podium?
Yeah, no, you didn't.
Half their team is KHL. I laughed when I saw that they were the favorites going in. We'll get into them certainly for sure. What is the top story? I mean, is Russia the top story of these Olympics, or is it Canada winning back-to-back golds, or is it the U.S. melting down in the last 2 games?
I think it depends on where you're from.
Yeah,
I really
totally
do.
Does.
I think it depends on where you're from. If I'm from the U.S., my disappointment in not medaling and at least showing up for the bronze game. Okay, you're in the bronze game, but you still have to play the game.
Yeah.
Russia, if I'm a Russian, I am still got my bottle of vodka in my hand because, I mean, they didn't even show up.
I think that if you are just random hockey fan in wherever, Germany.
Okay. Seeing as how they weren't in the tournament.
Yeah. I think Russia is the biggest story.
It has to be. I mean, all the hype leading into that, and Ovechkin from carrying the flame, the torch, and all the hype and all the strong players. And then you and I talked about this isn't going to be good for them because they're leaning too much on the KHL. And then they don't even get into a medal round.
Yeah. Look, Russia.
It's one thing not to win the gold.
Yeah,
but
look,
it's another thing not even to get into the medal round.
When you're going to play single elimination hockey with the best players in the world, at a certain point, there is a little bit of luck involved. I mean, there just is. When you're playing single elimination, best of 7, that evens out, but single elimination. So I get that, look, even Russia winning silver, they wouldn't have been happy. They said it numerous times throughout the Olympics. The highest officials in Russia said if we win gold, none of these other medals and any of these other sports matter.
Right.
If we don't get gold, none of these other medals and any of these other sports matter. I mean, they wanted to win gold in hockey. They've been talking about it for 4 years.
So what's comparable to that? What if Canada hadn't won in Vancouver?
Yes, that's comparable.
Right? That the country would have just melted. They would have closed their doors and melted.
All that ice would have just melted away for Canada. But I think Russia, Ovechkin was one of those guys that 4 years ago when there was talk that, okay, those Olympics in Canada are the last ones, he's like, I'm going to play. Right. So you're not going to keep me out of playing in my country. Malkin was the same way, not as big on it as Ovechkin was.
I heard some interesting commentary about that the reason the NHLPA was over there this year was because Ovechkin's like, I don't care what any of you do, I'm playing.
Yeah.
And they went, well, let's...
And then oddly enough, he didn't really play. He scored 40 seconds into the first game, and I think it is the biggest story. And I don't have anything against Ovechkin. I love watching that guy play. I genuinely felt sorry for him more than anybody else when their team got taken out.
Yeah, all the interviews I saw leading up to the Olympics, you could tell his heart was in this tournament and that he wanted to do well. And we'll talk about it later in the show, but I think there was outside forces that he wasn't counting on. Yeah. It's the best way to describe it.
There's only so much you can do, too. If you've played hockey at any level, you realize that at a certain point at the end of the day, you can go into a game and you can do everything you can do, and you can leave it all out there on the ice, but you can't control the other 19 players on your roster or the other 20, 21 players on the other team.
Right.
There's some stuff you can't control.
So like last night, I'm watching a controlled scrimmage between two teams.
And even that you can't control.
Nope. Even though it was controlled. I got it. Ding, ding. So
not even a courtesy laugh.
Sidney Crosby
was there.
Didn't light the lamp in Russia. Like everybody expects Sidney Crosby to light the lamp.
Scored a big goal in the gold medal game, but yeah.
But for the most part, just like, was Sidney playing? Yeah, he was playing, because I made the comment watching this controlled scrimmage last night that you have to watch what people do away from the puck. And it is so understated that what players can do away from the puck and what it means to a team, whether they're drawing a guy away, whether they're creating something. But the guys that are playing away from the puck put so much onto a game, and I think that's what Sidney was bringing. He might not have been scoring, but I thought Sidney played well.
Yeah, the more I watch this game closer and closer, just the sport in general, I do think part of what has separated Crosby from Ovechkin over these last 4 or 5 years is exactly what you just said, what he does away from the puck. Ovechkin is built to score. Yep. If he's not the single best goal scorer in the world, he's definitely one of the top 2.
Yep.
And when he doesn't score, when you have a guy like that, it's almost like having a sports car that you are only driving 15 miles per hour. I mean, it's not good for him to not score. It just burns him out and he gets frustrated. And you could see that again in these Olympics. I firmly believe he wanted to win a gold medal in these Olympics more than he wants a Stanley Cup right now and more than anybody else in these Olympics.
Right.
And you could see the frustration. Whereas Crosby, if he's not scoring, he'll set guys up.
He'll contribute.
And even if those guys don't score, it's the puck in the attack zone because he sets up Kunitz, and Kunitz misses the net, but whatever, because Bergeron comes around behind the net and they have a sustained pressure.
Right, and I think that the other thing that I liked about Team Canada watching the tournament was that as dry and as boring as it is, they had a set plan, and Coach Babcock made them stick to it.
Yeah, so let's get into Canada-U.S. Winning that game, I expected a 4-3 final. I mean, I expected offense from both teams. The U.S., I think we can agree, was the best team through the preliminary round. I mean, I know
absolutely
Sweden had a slightly better record, I guess, technically. But, I mean, the U.S. was dominant. And they played Russia, they played the Czech Republic. They kind of had the tougher schedule of anybody that got to the Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
And then the wheels just came off. No goals against Canada, no goals against Finland, which I think is a lot more unacceptable. But going into that Canada game, I wasn't one of those people that was like, oh, the U.S. has this, look how great they've been. I thought, we haven't seen Canada's best game yet. They've been saving it for the U.S. And so it's going to be the U.S. scoring a couple goals because Kessel was rolling and all these guys were scoring. But you're going to get into a shooting match with Canada. You're going to have a tough time. It's probably going to be 4-3. Instead, it was 1-0.
Well, and then I think off the back of that, though, I think it was Zach Parise that said it, is that if you look at Canada's schedule, whether it was easy or hard, the teams that were playing a defensive style of hockey. So they had to play that. So those games aren't going to be high scoring. So, look, they only won 2-1 against Latvia. That was the design of the game. So you go in against the U.S., it ends up being a 1-0 final. Canada had a defensive mindset, and they stuck to it.
Full disclosure that we probably should have done at the beginning of the show for anybody that hasn't listened before. I'm American. You're Canadian.
I'm Canadian.
So
yes.
this is probably the best sort of dichotomy you could have to discuss these Olympics. It's tough as an American to lose to Canada. It hurts a lot. And a lot of you aren't very quiet about the fact that you beat the U.S. However,
I didn't text you once.
You didn't. And that almost made it worse. I was just
Where's
waiting
Cannon's
for the
text?
Yeah. I was, very impressed by the goal they scored against the U.S. Just as a hockey fan, Taves pulling up like he's going to shoot. A lot of guys panic and shoot right there because there was traffic in front of the net, and instead he slides that perfect, almost slap pass over to Jamie Benn. But more than anything, Canada's offense never got going in this tournament, partially because of the reasons you just said, and they adapted to win with defense.
Right.
And coming in, it was supposed to be, if the U.S. has a chance, they're going to win with defense. Canada's going to steamroll everybody with their offense, and it was the other way around.
Right. I mean, you look at Canada's last two games, both shutouts.
Yeah. You get to the medal rounds and you shut out two good teams.
Right. You shut out the U.S. and you shut out Sweden. So, I mean, that says it all right there. And again, I mean, as dry as it was to watch, I think that, Babcock did have a system. He made his guys play. I heard a quote from him after, I think it was going into the U.S. game where he's like, I thought the guys played well. We have a system. We're sticking to our system. And he wasn't lying. I mean, I liked the way that Team Canada used the large ice. They took everything to the outside where that extra space was. And there was a couple of times 5-on-5 in the U.S. game where it looked almost like a power play. They just kept everything to the outside, kept the U.S. to the inside, and then when they moved to the inside, they were ready to move to the inside. And I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, and defensively, I mean, the U.S. just never even got close.
Right.
So it was just that game. What is frustrating to watch is when your hockey team, not just when they lose, when they don't get scoring chances. And the U.S. just didn't get them. And, again, they were cruising through those first 3-4 games getting scoring chances.
Well, we talked about it in the prep. I noticed a couple of times Canada put 5 players along the blue line. So when the U.S. came through the neutral zone, the only option they had was try to split it.
No matter who the 5 players are. But then when there's Shea Weber and Drew Doughty, I mean, what are you going to do?
So you dump the puck in, and then those 5 players just scatter to their points, and then it's going the other way.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like pretty fun to watch.
At the same time, it was beautiful hockey play and also disgusting from my perspective.
Well, and then, I want to move to, you had a guy like Price, who I thought played phenomenal, and I thought he played phenomenal not because he was facing 50 shots and stopping 50 shots. he was playing well because he wasn't getting a lot of shots because of the defensive play of the guys in front of him. But when he did get a shot, he was there.
He was stable. And sometimes that's harder. You talk to goalies and they say, I kind of want to see some shots.
I want to get in that rhythm, right? But he was like square every time. You just suck. And no rebounds. I noticed that Price didn't give up a lot of rebounds. Every time that puck came to him, he just sucked it in. And, as a forward, you're crashing the net and going, where's the puck?
No puck? Yeah.
There's no puck to bat in because Price has sucked it in and he's holding it and waiting for the whistle. Which brings me to my next point. Going into the Olympics, your dark horse was Finland.
Yeah.
And your dark horse was Finland because of goaltending.
Goaltending and the simple fact that they play very well as a team. I mean, that was my thinking behind Sweden. And look, Sweden, I mean, they got to the gold medal game. They didn't even go to overtime in any of the preliminary games. They played very well. I'm not saying that they would have beat Canada in the gold medal game, but it did hurt losing Henrik Zetterberg earlier in the tournament, and not having Henrik Sedin. Obviously, Canada lost John Tavares, but they have so many guys that the impact doesn't seem to be as big. And then losing Nicholas Backstrom 2 hours before the game probably didn't help Sweden either, and they're not happy about that.
Well, why would they be happy?
No, they're not. And so
that's an interesting story too.
We'll get to that. We may have to push that to news and notes, but Finland, a team, and this is what kind of bothered me about the U.S., when you went into that bronze medal game, Finland clearly was like, we're going to do everything we can to get an Olympic medal. I mean, here we are. We play 3 good periods of hockey. We walk away with a bronze medal. Yeah, it's not gold. It's not silver. It's not what we initially came here for, but it's a bronze medal.
It's a medal.
We still won it. And I don't want to say the U.S. didn't try, because that's not the case. But with the exception of maybe 4 or 5 guys, they didn't seem to want it nearly as much as Finland.
Right.
That game was unwatchable. I mean, the Canada game I watched to the very last second. And obviously, as an American, you want to beat Canada more than you really care about beating Finland.
Sure.
The Finland game, they got down. They took stupid penalties. They took some penalties that probably weren't penalties, but it was just unwatchable.
Okay, now everybody that's even listened to this show knows that I'm involved in youth hockey. And there's nothing more frustrating. And I had it happen to me Friday in a game. There's nothing more frustrating when a team scores a couple of early goals on you, that everybody's head drops and their shoulders drop. And that's what happened to Team USA in that Finland game. As soon as those first 2 Solani goals went in, everybody quit.
There seemed to be a combination of, I mean, and it was less than 24 hours from the Canada game. 24 hours ago we were thinking of beating our rivals and playing for gold. Now here we are playing this team. Finland wanted it, so it wasn't an easy walk. I mean, there was probably a thought there, too, of, okay, fine, we'll turn it on and we'll beat Finland. And
and Rask started.
Nothing. Yeah, thanks for that, by the way, Finland. Canada, or rather Sweden, gets Kari Lehtinen, and the U.S. gets Tuukka Rask. Nice. Thanks a lot. So that was what bothered me about the U.S. And overall, if you had told me coming in the U.S. is going to get 4th, I wouldn't have been excited, but they were ranked 7th.
Which brings me to the U.S.-Canada game on the women's side. I'll skip the game and I'll go right to the medal ceremonies. The U.S. girls wanted that game so bad. I've never seen so many tears and being upset over winning a silver medal. I mean, they're number 2 on the podium. They're winning a silver medal, and you could tell that, okay, oh, great, I won a silver medal, but they were like, tears were flowing. Some were holding back the tears. I watched the medal presentation. The girls are going, oh, this is great. I got a silver. They wanted that gold, and that's what the guys didn't have. The girls had that drive, and even though they medaled, it wasn't good enough. It still wasn't good enough.
Yeah, that.
I thought that was just.
I didn't watch when that game ended. Really, once Canada got the 5-on-3 in overtime, you knew it was over. And that wasn't even so much I'm an American, I want the U.S. to win and beat Canada. That really kind of disappeared. I just felt bad for them. Like I didn't feel bad for me as a fan. I felt bad for. I mean, there's really only 2 teams. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, and it actually could be a problem where they might take it out of the Olympics because it's so lopsided. It's just the U.S. and Canada.
Well, the format was adjusted.
They outshot Sweden 70-9 in the semifinal game. So,
but hold that thought, because to me that's a great statement on women's hockey in North America, both what Canada's doing and what the U.S. is doing. Women's hockey has come so far. I mean, everybody should be patting North America on the back.
No, and it was fun to watch.
It was great to watch.
Those games were fun to watch. It wasn't bad hockey. It's not the same hockey.
I even liked it when they were banging.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're not allowed to do that.
Well, they clearly don't. Those two teams don't like each other, and that's why it was tough to watch. If the U.S. had just lost, they would have been just beaten up. But to lose the way they lost, that leads to my question. A, did you know Kevin Dineen was coaching?
Yes.
Because I didn't know that until the Olympics started.
Yes, I did know that.
But my real question is, if you are on Team USA's women's team, A, that would be awkward, and I don't know how you got there.
Right.
What are you doing with that silver medal? I mean, I'm probably putting it on eBay.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I absolutely am.
No, that's insulting. It's
not insulting.
It's not respecting the game.
It's not.
And respecting what the tournament stands for.
Okay, here's my reasoning for that. 4 years ago, you lose to Canada, you get the silver medal. Absolutely. I love it. I want the gold, but it's a silver Olympic medal. If I'm a downhill skier and I get bronze, I'm going crazy. I got an Olympic medal. That silver medal, this one specifically that was awarded this week, reminds every girl on that team of probably the worst moment of their hockey career. That's what it is. It's not a silver medal in that one specific instance. It is a reminder of a 2-0 lead against your rivals with a gold medal on the line with 3.5 minutes left.
Well, I'm not a big Mike Milbury fan. You know that.
Yes, I do know that.
And he made the best point. I mean, Roenick went off on officials and his post commentary on the game, but Milbury goes 3.5 minutes, 2-0 lead. Really? And and you can't say it any simpler than that.
No, you can't. Because as much as you got to give Canada credit for showing that poise with 3.5 minutes left to be like, we're still in this, you got to make some mistakes to give up a 2-goal lead.
Because I'll be honest with you, I'm watching that game. I thought it was over. I thought it was going to be a 2-0 final. I really, truly believed that.
But they kind of went into that shell that teams go into when you really want to win. You're like, okay, we just got to hold on for 3.5 minutes. You're not going to hold on. And look, I mean, the more I think about that game, they throw the puck down the ice. It hits the post on an empty net. Maybe not eBay. Maybe I hold on to the silver medal and I give it to a family member down the line, but I'm never looking at that silver medal.
Listen, you know what? There's a handful of girls on the Team USA that aren't returning. I don't know if Julie Chu is going to return. She's 31 now, so she might. I mean, Haley Wickenheiser on Canada did it. She's in her mid to late 30s, so that was probably her last Olympics.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is if I'm one of the younger girls, because the average age on Team USA was 23.
Yeah, they were young.
This is a young team. If nothing else, that medal is motivation.
Yeah. And look, if I'm Canada and we end up losing that game 2-0, I'm still holding on to the silver medal. It's a lot of hard work, but it's just the way it went down.
Yeah, but, I look at it differently. I mean, I look at the honor of playing in the Olympics. I look at the honor of wearing that jersey. I look at the honor of I'm one of 25 girls out of how many hundred that made this roster. That's a big honor, and I've got a silver medal to reflect that. And I can tell people that I'm a multi-medal winner in the Olympics.
You're looking at it the right way. I'm looking at it the irrational, I just lost a 2-0 lead in the gold medal game with 3.5 minutes left way. But it's...
And by the way, just a side note to wrap this up, I thought the girls looked great. I thought it was a great game. Our favorite ref was reffing that game, and I'm not going to say any names.
Specifically your favorite ref.
And I'm like, when I heard his name, I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah, we got more Olympic stuff coming up I want to get into, but the NHL is back this week, so we'll get into that.
Back. We'll get to
next
that
segment. Let's do that.
You're listening to The Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
Segment 2, NHL season resumes this week.
Yay.
What an emphatic yay from Doug.
Yay.
Most teams have about between 22 and 25 games left this season.
Yeah, it starts not Monday but Tuesday, because today was the closing ceremonies of the Olympics, gives everybody a travel day, and we're back at it Tuesday, but it's not really a busy schedule. There's one game.
Yeah, it's Buffalo, Carolina, if I remember correctly.
At Buffalo, yeah.
So not a game with huge playoff implications. Well, Carolina's up there, but Buffalo.
Well, the funny part is that Buffalo plays again Wednesday night. Back-to-back home games.
Specifically funny because Buffalo is clearly trying to get done with their season as quickly as possible.
And if I was in Buffalo, I would too.
Yeah. Can we play 3 on Wednesday and just let's get this done?
Can we just get this over with?
Here's the storyline I'm looking at coming out of these Olympics. A, how did the Olympics affect some of these teams? Just the breaks. We've talked about this in the shows leading up to the Olympics. There's that effect on certain guys. We saw it maybe with Bobby Ryan. We saw it maybe with Martin St. Louis and plenty of other players. when they got left off teams, they either played a lot better or a lot worse. But also teams like Dallas that were playing really good before the break, it feels like forever ago they played their last game. So is all that momentum gone for a team that I don't want to say was overachieving, but they were kind of overachieving. I mean, it's not like Chicago was playing well or Pittsburgh or St. Louis, teams that are just talent-wise better.
Or is Jamie Benn and Coach Ruff going to bring some mojo back to the team?
That's the other thing. Maybe guys are even better because they went over there, particularly some of the goalies who face shots from the best players in the world.
Well, of course, we said it in the first segment. I'm born in Canada, so I'm watching Team Canada a little more closely than other teams. I thought Jeff Carter looked great.
He really did. He really did.
Your
boy Rick Nash. No,
I was right on that one.
You're so anti-Nash.
Well, because everybody pumps this guy up and puts him on a pedestal, and he doesn't perform. I don't understand the North American media when they do that type of thing. It's like Rick Nash was a highly selected, highly touted athlete, and he's just this year and last year he's just not performing.
He was better statistically with Columbus.
Yes.
Not to derail you. You were making a point about Jeff Carter.
I thought Jeff was kind of struggling before they went over to Sochi. Is this going to help him and the Kings when he gets back?
It might. Now, here's the team, the one specific team other than like the teams I like and that I'm following, that I'm looking at. Detroit comes in 64 points, which has them fifth in the Atlantic, and as of this exact moment,
eighth.
Yeah, eighth by a point over Columbus and Washington and Ottawa. Henrik Zetterberg's out 8 weeks with back surgery. Is this the year Detroit finally misses the playoffs?
I said it before. Yes.
I almost made a wager with you that there's no way they would miss the playoffs because I still think Detroit does make it. But boy, the injuries are hitting them this year.
The injuries are hitting them because
I don't.
I just think
karma.
I know. I just think that I've said it. I said it last year, and I'll say it again. I just think this roster is starting to get old.
Older, not old.
Older, and they count on the same guys over and over again, and it's going to bite you at the end. Law of averages say that's not going to sustain.
If they were in the West, I think I would feel comfortable saying this probably is the year that they finally have. What is it, 24 years in a row they've made the playoffs? I think it's 1989.
Well, I mean, they're only a point ahead of Columbus, Ottawa, Washington.
Three pretty dangerous teams.
Out of those three, I think Ottawa and Washington are going to make the push.
Okay, that leads into my second question. What sort of impact does this Olympic performance or lack thereof have on Ovechkin?
You know, we talked about that when he carried the torch. I remember that episode. And we were both kind of, well, if he wins a gold, he's just going to be juiced. I think he's going to be more comfortable back with his guys in Washington. And
I think Washington is screwed.
Really?
I
don't.
I think they're in a tough spot. I shouldn't say screwed, but I think they're in a tough spot because just for this year, he put so much, and I don't blame him, into that. And look, if Russia, even if they didn't medal, let's say they did what the U.S. did. They got to the Final Four. They lost those 2 games. But Ovechkin was the leading scorer, not Phil Kessel.
I wonder if everybody just heard me nod my head.
Well, I heard it. Okay. That's all that really matters, right? It encouraged me to go on with my point that I've now lost. If Ovechkin at least had a good tournament, there's going to be frustration. There's going to be a little bit of a letdown period, but I think he comes back as Ovechkin. Now I think it might take a couple weeks for him to kind of ramp back up and be Ovechkin and really go on one of those runs again. There's no way. I mean, that guy has to be disappointed.
It was funny, you know, because way back when we first started the hockey podcast, I was questioning what Adam Oates was doing with this team. My mind has done a 180 when it comes to Adam Oates. This guy knows what he's doing.
Oh, yeah.
I really like what he's doing. And, you know, that's why he's an NHL coach, and I'm a guy watching the NHL. He's not going to let it happen. He's not going to let it happen. Washington is too talented. I think it's going to be a battle down to the wire between Ottawa and Washington for that 8th spot.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say it that way, because part of the reason I don't think Malkin has that same problem is because he has Crosby right there saying, look, you can be down or whatever. I don't care. We need to win the Stanley Cup this year.
Right.
And Ovechkin doesn't really have that. I mean, Ovechkin is the man in Washington. So, look, if the Capitals go on a nice run, if he does what he did last year, where he just 23 goals in 23 games or whatever it was, and he carries them into the playoffs, they might even be more dangerous.
Also, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you play for Boston or Buffalo, whether you're from Sweden.
It matters. The difference between Boston and Buffalo is 40 points.
No, whether you're from Sweden or from Canada or from the U.S., every single player in the NHL only wants to do one thing and one thing only, and it's to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and I think that will quickly come back to Ovechkin, but if it takes him 2 weeks to get back on track,
I don't think his coach will let him do that.
Well, we'll see. He doesn't have 2 weeks with
he's too good.
Rest.
He doesn't.
Yeah.
He's too good of a player, and I think Adam Oates right now is doing everything right with that team. That I don't think that's going to happen. That's just my opinion, but we'll see in the first couple of weeks back.
Well, these Olympians got no rest, and he's right there in the middle of a pretty competitive race in the East. I mean, it's close. Whether the hockey has been as good at the bottom of the Eastern Conference playoff picture as it has in the West, it's still a race with all those teams right there. Carolina and New Jersey aren't that far back.
By the way, Washington's first game back is against the Panthers.
Well, there you go. So maybe everything I just said is void. I didn't even realize that. One last thing, talking about the NHL, the Islanders, 52 points on the season. They're done.
How bad do you feel for that team?
I feel very bad for them. I feel bad for John Tavares. And this reinforces the point you and I have been making. Mm-hmm. That was it for NHL players in the Olympics.
It has to be. You know, I heard an interview with Sean Burke of the Phoenix Coyotes and Mike Landis on TSN. They do a show called Off the Record. And Sean made a point during the interview that injuries is the thing that's always weighing in the back of general managers and owners' heads when those guys go over there. You know, it's one thing to get a bruise or a cut or something, but John Tavares is done.
Done for the year.
And not only done because he has a broken arm or anything, it's a knee.
Yeah, John Tavares is 23. He's going to have a great career. He's already having a great career. I don't want to blow this out of proportion, but
they were so hot for so long.
If I'm Garth Snow,
yeah.
And look, Garth Snow's exact quote was he called the IOC, IHF, quote, a joke. So you could tell how upset he is. Now, there's not much those two organizations could have done. I mean, you're playing hockey. But when your best player and one of the 3 or 4 best players in the NHL has a knee injury, then you start to worry, like, does this change the way he plays when he comes back? I don't think it will, but I understand why he's frustrated.
Right.
And, yeah, you and I were talking about this leading up, whether there was a significant injury or not, that just having those guys out there. Like, look, Zetterberg's out for 8 weeks. That's not necessarily because of the Olympics. He was having back issues anyway before the Olympics, but he played.
So should he have taken the 2 weeks and rested?
Well, there you go. Alexander Barkov, who is Florida's one bright spot right now, he's out with a knee injury. Thomas Kopetsky's out with a head injury.
Barkov's a rookie.
Yeah. Matt Zuccarello, who's the Rangers' leading scorer, is out with a hand injury now. Now, look, they could have had these injuries anyway playing NHL games, but they're getting paid to play NHL games.
Right.
And so my stance on this has changed a little bit. Watching the Olympics, as much as it ended badly for me, I like having the NHL players over there. It's fun to watch. But my stance has not changed that this was probably it for at least 8 years. We're not going to see him in 2018 in South Korea. We're just not.
Well, I don't think they're going to want to come back. Because I think that if Gary Bettman has his way and he brings back the World Cup of Hockey, we looked at the last 2004 World Cup teams. Every single team, every country that was at the Olympics, except for the exception of Germany, this year Slovenia was there, played in the 2004 World Cup. If you do that every August, not every 4 years in August, what's the difference? You're playing for your country. You're playing for bragging rights. The Olympics, at the end of the day, yes, you get a medal. You get an Olympic medal, but it's bragging rights.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand that there's a little bit of
and
a
difference.
difference.
Just said, these guys want the Stanley Cup. Stanley Cup means more than a gold medal. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you for about 95% of the players. But there are some, I think, that
the guys from Slovenia.
Those neon uniforms were extremely bright. It was difficult to look at sometimes. So you have that. You have the injury. And then you also have the Nicholas Backstrom thing. And the NHLPA is not happy over that. And you have what you were saying off the air. You have a guy that's been playing in the NHL forever. He's never tested positive for anything bad.
Right, and he's taken all the substances that he uses during his NHL season. So I'm not doing anything wrong.
Sweden is livid over how that went down because they claim he got tested a few days ago, and then they were told 2 hours before the gold medal game.
Yeah, that's not right.
And look, Noah Zetterberg, he's basically their only center at that point. So they lost the game 3-0. I'm not trying to make excuses for Sweden, but you can't tell me that doesn't affect them to lose their best player a couple
Well,
minutes
and it
game.
comes back to another thing that I constantly repeat is the fact that most people in sports in general, whether it's professional, amateur, or youth, don't understand the importance of the mental portion of the game. So 2 hours before a game, you get this piece of news. Where's your focus?
Well, it's
distracted.
It's suddenly it goes from we have a chance to win the gold medal to, even though you still have that chance to win the gold medal, our best player that isn't named Henrik Lundqvist and maybe Erik Karlsson, our best player up front is now not playing.
Right.
So somewhere in your mind you're thinking we're at a disadvantage against Canada, and obviously Canada's going to pounce on you and you're going to pay for it. Just to be clear, or at least as clear as the story is right now, it sounds like it was an allergy medicine that he's been taking for the last 7 years. So not a banned substance by anybody's standards except the Olympics.
Because the Olympics has such a stringent list of ingredients.
Which they should.
Well, I think sometimes they do it because I remember an athlete that was a U.S. Was it a skier?
They should for other sports. I don't think they should for hockey.
It was something in his supplements that he was taking, some obscure ingredient, and it's not really being used in a performance enhancing way.
Yeah, this isn't baseball.
It was being used because it was a supplement so his body was healthy. And this guy has an allergy and he pops a couple of Claritins, and all of a sudden one of the ingredients in the Claritin pops up on their list of things. I'm like, look, he's an NHL professional player. He's doing everything he's supposed to be. Olympians that train for the Olympics every 4 years.
The listeners can't see the air quotes either.
They're used to that list of banned substances. So anytime they pick a supplement, and I'm going to put a supplement in my mouth, they have to check the ingredients.
Their whole life is tailored to these specific, whatever requirements that you can or can't do. If you are a bobsledder, if you're a moguls guy for skiing, your whole 4 years between Olympics is tailored to this is how I train, this is what I eat, this is the supplements I can take because I know I can take them. Nicholas Backstrom's career is tailored around the Washington Capitals, not the Olympics.
Right.
And so I could see that being an issue too. I just think that more and more issues than you or I even projected have come up in the last 2 weeks that makes it that much tougher that we're going to see NHL players at the Olympics, at least in 4 years.
Okay, so let's end on a happy note.
Okay. US won?
Tuesday night.
Oh.
No. Tuesday night, we're back with NHL hockey. It's only one game.
US at least score.
Wednesday night, we have 4 games. Thursday night's
going to be good.
It's going to be good. We got 12 games going. All right, 24 teams are back in action on Thursday night. Also, the little whipped cream on top of that with the cherry, NHL revealed returns with a 2-hour special.
Oh, that's a good
2
point.
hours.
Yeah, I've been missing that. I didn't realize that
I've been
wasn't
watching
gonna be
them.
on.
I've been watching not the replays, but I've gone back and watched the other over again.
I stopped midway through episode 3 once I realized there wasn't going to be episodes for 2 weeks, and then watched the rest of it last night.
And so I'm like, I'm going to watch all 3 again before Thursday, and the more I watch it,
the better it is.
Oh my God, it's just
done well. I'm
just watching this going, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
And there should be the 4th episode, and then I think there's 3 more after that. But the 4th episode, I'm assuming, is going to be, because it's 2 hours long, it's going to have some of that game we talked about with the Coyotes and Blackhawks to kind of lead into the Olympics and then 2 weeks of Olympics.
Yeah, there's actually I heard NBC promote it. I think maybe it was Doc Emmerich that promoted it in one of the games, had said that they followed certain players around the Olympic Village, and it's going to be good. It's 2 hours.
And the one last thing I'll say that's on a good note, unless you're a fan of one of these teams, we've got between 22, 25 games left in the regular season. All but 5 teams are still in the playoff race across the board.
That's good league-wide.
Yeah,
that's such a great thing for the league to be able to say that.
And the trade deadline is also coming up, so there's no break here. You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter @HockeyPodcast for even more hockey news.
#DoIt.
News and notes. Doug, before we get too deep into news and notes, I've got a
Why
question
are you
for
whispering?
Because I don't know. I want everybody to hear this.
Okay.
Here's my question for you.
Sure.
What is the gap? And it's kind of weird to ask this question right now. Canada just won back-to-back gold medals in hockey for the first time, I think, since 48 and 52, which that in itself is surprising to me. Their women's team just won a gold medal again as well. So it seems maybe odd to ask this question. So I'm just going to ask it open-endedly. What's the gap between Canadian hockey and all these other top countries right now? Is it bigger or smaller than it was 20 years ago?
I don't think it's bigger.
I don't think it is either.
No. After watching the U.S., women wanted it more. The men, for some reason, didn't have that fire. I don't know what extinguished that fire, because the first 3 games were like, how are we going to stop this team?
Yeah, they actually did look unstoppable.
Young, quick, scoring.
They had Jonathan Quick.
Quick looked phenomenal.
Yeah, he never really let up. I mean, that Finland game almost doesn't even feel like it was the same tournament, but before that.
So there's too much talent in the other countries, Sweden, Russia, Finland. They all have very good leagues in their own countries. I don't think the gap's widened.
First of all, you have to give Canada credit. And I think it's great for the sport in a way when they win the gold medal. And they have a lot of fans that feel that it's their sport and everybody else is kind of, you're coming over.
It is.
You're fortunate to be allowed to play our sport. Whatever.
Well, that's true.
Whatever. That notwithstanding, I think the gap is a lot smaller than it's ever been. They won gold in both, so they're making a push back, and they found ways to adapt. And like I said, women, they fought back in a game that they probably should have lost to win. The men, at the end of the day, I know they didn't blow anybody out, and they did almost lose to Latvia, which that one's always going to just boggle my mind. But they were undefeated through the tournament. So they're still the best. Canada's still the best hockey program out there. But I think the U.S. is right there. I think Sweden is – I mean, they beat the U.S. by a goal. Okay, Sweden's right there.
I think you've got technology on your side. It is the year 2014. I look at a team like Latvia. They have an NHL coach coaching that team. They don't have the Latvian national coach coaching that team. They hired Ted Nolan to coach.
Who, by the way, I don't think would have been welcome in Canada if Latvia had somehow taken Canada out. That would have been catastrophe for Canada.
Right. And I mean, and he was creative. I mean, the goal against Canada, the play that they set up and executed for their lone goal was brilliant. It was just so much fun to watch. So, I mean, I think coaching is much better. I mean, look at Team Canada's bench. Look at the 3 coaches on that bench.
No, yeah.
You had Babcock, Ruff, and what is his name? Michel
Therrien?
Therrien.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at one point, the pundits were going, "Oh, Canada, they're out coaching themselves."
No, they got it done.
They got it done.
And so, again, let me be clear. I'm not saying, Canada, I don't know if they really deserve to be the best. Although, oddly enough, they're ranked number 2 after winning the gold medal today. Sweden's still ranked number 1 in the world
I don't have
rankings.
a problem with that.
But my point is the gap, for all the reasons you just said, is tighter than ever.
Right.
With Sweden, the U.S., and Russia, if they want to be Russia again.
I don't know a lot about Russia, but I do know countries like Sweden, in the U.S., in Canada.
And Finland. We got to put Finland up there,
Finland,
too. They medal every year.
I'm not real sure, but they have development programs. So the younger players get to come through development programs before they get to the pinnacle.
Yeah. And Finland, they do that cool thing. I almost think the Olympic-size ice surface is maybe a little too wide and that the North American might be a little too narrow. Finland's right in the middle. It's like 92 feet wide. And that's how they play over there. And Finland's gotten a lot better over recent years. I know when we did one of the early episodes of this show, we looked at the growth of the sport in all these different countries. And in Canada, it was actually kind of going down because I would assume their kids are also playing other sports now more and more.
Well, I think that's what happens with the population growth. And you have Canada is such a melting pot of people coming from other places. I knew growing up in the Toronto area, the other big sport was soccer.
Yeah.
And then when the Toronto Blue Jays came to Toronto, you had the Montreal Expos as well. But in the Toronto area, because that's where I grew up, the interest in baseball grew. When I was a kid, it was more softball or men's league softball after work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
basketball. Basketball's huge in Canada right now.
And some of the top prospects going into the NBA right now are Canadian.
Right, because a lot of those guys are being recruited to play in NCAA basketball.
So in a weird way, I guess I'm trying to justify for myself that it's good that Canada won because that's them making a push back, and yet the U.S. is right there, Sweden's right there, Finland. The Czechs didn't look as good this time, but that's, I think when we did we looked at that study a year ago, the Czechs were the team or the country that had actually grown the most over the previous few years or whatever. So let's take this to Russia.
Okay.
I guess we'll start with Patrick Waugh's comments. Do you want his
Give me his quote.
It's lengthy. He was on I believe it was a Canadian or a radio show in Colorado.
Okay.
Just talking, and he talked about the Olympics. He said among other things.
Interesting for the head coach of the Colorado Avalanche to be on a radio show in Colorado.
I don't even know what's going on over there. It's chaos. For a guy like Ovechkin, it should be a great learning process for him. You can be as good as you want, but if you don't win a Stanley Cup, if you don't win a gold medal, it's a bit like a golfer who's the best player without winning a major. It's like a monkey on your shoulder that you want to get rid of, and I think Ovechkin is going in that direction. First of all, if you had a monkey on your shoulder, wouldn't you want to get rid of all monkeys on your shoulder? That just seems...
Especially if it wasn't wearing a diaper.
And on that note, you look at Russia, and the expectations they had coming in, particularly on Ovechkin. I don't know what happened to that team. They didn't.
Okay. Here's my take, and we talked about it going into the Olympics. I think there was way too many, and this is kind of a thread that's been going through a couple of teams. There's way too many KHL players on that roster. Because understandably, it's in the motherland. You're going to want players from your elite league on that roster. But then when it came to the bench, there were stories coming out of Sochi saying the coaches were favoring the KHL players. And then now there was animosity between the NHL players, the KHL players, and the coaches. You can't have that. You have to have unity to be able to play as a unit. And I think that's what hurt them.
Hence the word unity.
Yes.
From watching that game, specifically the game against Finland, by the end, it felt like if Ovechkin, Malkin, Kovalchuk, Datsuk, or Radulov, and I know, look, that's 5 of the best players in the world. If they don't score, there's no chance. It didn't even feel like the other players, it didn't even feel like they had other players. It felt like they had a 5-man attack. And so, I mean, those guys were playing a ton. They had to be wearing down by the end. And if you're the other team and you're talking about an all-world team in Finland, or if they had advanced, you're playing Canada or the U.S. or Sweden or whatever, they know they have to stop 5 guys and they win. Granted, you can make a case that those 5 guys are in the top 15 in the world, and that's where it's frustrating for Russia. They did this 4 years ago. My problem isn't that they have KHL players on their team. Radulov's a KHL player, Kovalchuk KHL player. They deserve to be there.
Tikhonov.
My problem was the insistence of we have to have a certain amount of KHL players. Well, that's fine, and you're not meddling. You're just not. And I don't know if that's going to change in the future if NHL players are going back to the Olympics or what. But it's weird not seeing Russia medal, and they didn't medal last time either.
Well, it's weird. And then, like I said, there was a running theme. I heard that there was in the Czech bench, the head coach of the Czech team was favoring players. That's why certain players didn't make the roster.
Yeah.
And then I heard, actually today, that a well-starred young defenseman was getting less ice time for Sweden because the coach didn't like that player. And I'm like, then why do you bring these guys on the roster?
Yeah, well, and that goes back. I won't even go to the U.S. stuff. It's my frustration.
But you know what I'm saying, right? Yeah. It's like if I have a general manager and I have an executive board and we put a team together, everybody's going to be on the same page. Because if I'm the general manager, and this is a great segue, but if I'm Steve Yzerman and I say I want players X, 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 and X, I'm sitting down with my coaching staff and saying, this is how I see it. How do you see it? Because I don't want to pick a guy and waste a roster spot because he's sitting there on the bench, not even breaking a sweat.
The NHL teams that have success, the coach and the GM and the coaches down at the minor league level are all on the same page. You can't find me an NHL team that has any sort of infighting at the very top. You might find it in the locker room, but you're not finding it at the very top. And they have 82 games to work it out as opposed to 3.
Right. You have to be. I'm sorry. You just have to be on the same page. You can't have a coach going, I'm going to do it my way. Well, you know what? If you're going to do that way, you know what? You're going to shame your country. You're going to shame the logo on the front of the jersey, and you're not going to medal.
Yeah, and look, everybody can't medal, but there were teams that I just don't feel like played to their potential. I think that's, and I thought the U.S. played very much to their potential, so I'm not talking about them.
You know what? The team I was impressed with Latvia, and I was impressed with Slovenia, even though their uniforms hurt my eyes.
Yeah, and Slovenia is also known as just Team Kopitar, with Kopitar and Kopitar's brother and Kopitar's dad. You mentioned Steve Yzerman,
yes,
who is stepping down as GM of Team Canada. Nothing like going out on top, huh? Back-to-back golds.
That's the way I would do it.
Yeah.
Next.
What are you gonna do? And maybe that's a sign that there's not going to be NHL players. Or maybe that, look, I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but how tough must it have been to be Steve Yzerman in the weeks leading up to the tournament? And whether he was the one that left Martin St. Louis off the roster or not.
Or a couple other guys, yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, St. Louis on his NHL team.
Right.
So whether he had the final say or not, I mean, we don't know. Maybe he was pushing for him, and other guys in that front office were saying, I want these other guys more. That had to be uncomfortable. I mean, you're going into the locker room after your games, and, hey, here's my best player right now because Steven Stamkos is hurt. Hey, Marty, by the way, sorry we left you off the Olympic roster. Now, it all worked out. St. Louis ends up walking away with a gold medal.
Right.
And he deserved to be on the team. But I wonder if that might have been the last, or one of the last straws for Yzerman, of just like, this is an uncomfortable situation for an NHL GM to be in, where he has to pass on his own players.
Well, I mean, as a general manager, I wouldn't have a problem whatsoever. I'm like, okay, I'm taking Marty St. Louis. Give me somebody better.
Yeah.
Well, scoring leader last year, right?
Yeah, I believe he won.
He's kind of in front right now, too. So, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
But the problem is, again, it goes back to the coaching. You got to be on the same page. If they had a certain plan, it's not because he's a scorer. There might have been, after watching the tournament now, going, okay, they picked certain players because they did have a plan in place.
Like Rick Nash. No, sorry. Okay. I don't want to derail you again. Let's end on
the positive. The positive for Rick Nash, I'll give him this.
Okay.
He finished a +2.
Well, let's see that.
All right,
nice.
Finished plus.
That's nice.
Didn't score, but he finished a +2.
Two very positive notes to go out on. I don't know if you saw this, but the interview between Al Michaels and Vladislav Tretiak, did you get to see that at all? I think that's when you were coaching out in Anaheim, the youth hockey.
No, I didn't see that.
Really cool to see the guy who called the Miracle on Ice game interviewing the goalie that had gotten pulled and was the best goalie in the world really up to that point. It's just really cool. They just, I don't know if they had ever interviewed each other before. I don't know if Michaels had ever interviewed Tretiak before. That didn't sound like it, but they were just both very candid about that game. That was really cool to see.
I hear Bob Costas won't be taking the red eye anymore.
Well, I thought we made it through the whole show, and here you go doing your Doug jokes to get Doug to laugh. The last high note, Teemu
Everybody's
Selanne.
laughing. Sorry. Well, that was funny.
Probably not Bob Costas. Teemu Selanne, tournament MVP of the Olympics. That's awesome.
It's awesome. It's fitting. Again, you watch how that team played. They played with heart. They played with fire. They didn't care that the medal was bronze. They know that they're going home with an Olympic medal.
And for Selanne, his sixth, it was his sixth Olympic, right? He has 4 Olympic medals. Am I getting these stats right?
I think so, yeah.
And he had a very good
and this is his swan song. I mean, he's publicly said after this, he's hanging up the skates.
Yeah. So he goes out as one of the top scorers. And
he's on a team that could be going to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, he's having a pretty good year. He's picked a good way to go out. I will say this, and I agree, Selanne should have won it. I think that was perfect. Phil Kessel was the leading scorer, as it turned out. Carey Price goals against average was 0.59.
He was outstanding.
Carey Price gets a gold
2
medal.
shutouts, man.
Yeah, and Luongo, when he came in for his one game, he had a shutout too. So Canada's defense was pretty solid. That's it for episode 31. Join us next week as we prepare for the NHL's trade deadline.
We're also going to be looking out to see if there's any more fallout on the doping suspension of Nicholas Backstrom in the Olympics. We will also recap a week's worth of NHL hockey.
Yay! Plus, whatever else happens in the next 7 days. Thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast. Yay!